What's up, guys? 2-1 yesterday or last night. I'll take it as a win, but of course, the Phoenix Suns, just an absolutely brutal loser, did not show up really. The second half was just awful for them. It seemed like, they were like losing by a little bit going into half. Seemed like, maybe they'll turn it around. They're at home. They had one of the worst third quarters I think you could possibly have. It was atrocious, but then the other two got there. Edmonton, nice, easy win in hockey. And then the San Francisco Giants got a little bit sketchy there. That game was 0-0 into the ninth inning, and I believe Pittsburgh in the top of the ninth had runners on second and third with one out, and they did not score. They're in a situation where they could have scored on like a sac fly or basically anything being put into the air, and they did not score, and then San Francisco wound up winning. So you need some luck sometimes. I don't think it was necessarily the wrong handicap, although Pittsburgh got much better pitching than I anticipated in that one. We'll move on to today. We do have NHL. I'll talk about that first. A couple of these series are 3-0 in the Eastern Conference here. Two of the three Eastern Conference series are 3-0. Carolina against the Islanders. I do not have a plan on this, so I'm just talking about them in order. Just Carolina's up from -180 to -194. 75% of the tickets on them, but 58% of the cash on the other side on the Islanders. Hockey, I think in a 3-0 series situation, it's a little bit different, I think, in the NHL than in other sports, because the NHL, it's such a close game in hockey that it's really like the only sport where teams can overcome an 0-3 deficit, which I think has happened multiple times in the NHL. I mean, it's still very rare, but in the NHL, I think it's at least happened, I think, 4 or 5 times. Maybe I'd have to go look, because I know it happened against the Bruins. I'm pretty sure it was the Philadelphia Flyers overcame a 3-0 deficit against the Bruins somewhere back in like the late 2000s. I think kind of a brutal series for the Bruins in that one. But hockey, so I think teams, when they're down 0-3 in hockey, I think it's less of like a dream crusher scenario, which I'll talk about a little bit in the NBA in a little bit, because of course we do have an 0-3 NBA series that is going today. But in the NHL, I think maybe that 0-3 team might not be like totally dream crushed in that scenario. So you're getting the Islanders as like a giant home underdog here, and maybe they'll just they will be in desperation mode probably. Maybe they'll just show up, try to get that game there. It does look like the cash discrepancy is on the Islanders there, and you're getting them as a big home underdog in that one. Maybe too big of an underdog, but the line has also moved up on Carolina. I could see like taking a puck line on the Islanders to maybe keep that game close on the brink of elimination, but I'm not going to get involved in that one. Florida, Tampa, Florida. Some people expected Tampa to win this series, expected this to be a close series. Seems like Florida has their number. Florida 3-0 in the series, and they're now up from -111 to -123 as a road favorite. The line moving up on them, although it looks like the cash is 81% of it on Tampa, and tickets evenly split 50-50. So even though it looks like the line is moved up on Florida, the percentages are showing a cash discrepancy on the Tampa Bay side. So those are kind of in conflict with each other. In both of these games, the cash percentage is actually in conflict with where the number has moved a little bit. But of course, maybe some of the cash is coming in and taking that bigger number. So again, here you're getting a pretty big home underdog in Tampa Bay. And here, like if you look at the previous games, you can see like what the line was in those games. Like Tampa was a -120 underdog in that one, and now they're a -120, or excuse me, a -120 favorite. And now Florida's the -123 road favorite because they're up 3-0. So again, in both of these games, I think I would kind of lean to taking the home underdog, although I'm not going to do it in either one of those, but taking the 0-3 team as a home underdog there. I think it's a little bit of a zigzag situation, really, where I think you could come in and get a little bit of additional value on that team just because they're down 3-0 or 0-3 or whatever you want to say. Carolina was only -170 in game 3 of that series. And the Islanders actually out-hit them and outshot them and out-face-off them. Like the stats were significantly in the Islanders' favor in that game. And Carolina still wound up winning that game. So that score was actually kind of misleading in game 3 of the Carolina and Islanders game. Maybe less so in the Tampa-Florida game 3. But so maybe there is actually a little bit of value on, although Tampa actually out-hit Florida and out-face off them as well. And the shot percentages were close in game 3, actually. So I do think that the value in those games is to be had on those 0-3 home underdogs. But I'm not going to quite be able to get there with them. And then my Bruins are in a 2-1 series at Toronto in game 4 here. Toronto's up from minus 106 to minus 116. 61% of the tickets on them, 69% of the cash. So this one has the cash discrepancy and the line movement both on Toronto. So those kind of in agreement with each other. People, some of the bettors coming in feeling like this is kind of a zigzag type of series where Boston, wins game 1. Toronto comes in and adjusts and wins game 2. Boston readjusts and wins game 3. Does that mean Toronto's going to come in and is it going to be a zigzag, and we'll have Toronto come in and zag on the zig again and adjust and win game 4? I'm not so sure. The Bruins, kind of the knock on them is that their coach has insisted on alternating goalies every other game. So Swayman game 1 and then Ullmark game 2, Swayman game 3. And he's been doing that throughout the entire season. But it's like, I think that removes a lot of consistency from your team. And if you have one goalie who's really hot, because of course Boston does have two really good, they're both really good goaltenders. I think Ullmark won the Vezina last year, but Swayman has been really hot, and he's been really good in the playoffs in both games that he's played so far. So it's like in the playoffs, I think you have to ride the hot hand, man. And the team, I think when the team has that goalie that's hot playing behind them, I think the team plays with more confidence as well, because they know that goalie is like making all these crazy stops. So I think it like is kind of jarring and removes some of that confidence and brings in some inconsistency when the coach keeps switching the goaltender. So Swayman, he was excellent in game 1, which I saw that game live in person. And then again in game 3, he was also really good. Ullmark wasn't terrible in game 2, but it just felt like a different vibe. He wasn't as good. Swayman is out there. He's playing like out of his mind, basically, and that's kind of what you need in the playoffs. Or Ullmark is like putting in, like his game was fine, but Swayman was like over the top good, making like a couple of saves that were so insane in both games that it like had an effect on the outcome of the game. Although maybe not in game 1 because it was a Bruins blowout, but it also, the Bruins seemed to be playing with more like intensity and with more confidence with Swayman in net there, and the coach might finally be like seeing that. He might actually play Swayman in net in this one. So I think that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on with the Bruins. Like, do you think the Bruins are a better play if Swayman is in there because he's the hot goalie right now and he's been really, really good in the series, and it seems like they just get a boost in confidence when he's in there? I think maybe. I think if Ullmark is in there, I would trust the Bruins a little bit less. But, of course, now that I've said that, the opposite's going to happen. And then in the late game, this is the game I'm going to be on, man, because I think this 2-0 Vegas lead in this series is a little bit misleading. So in this series, this is weird. So you have the other 3 series are all in game 4, and they're all going to have game 4 basically done before game 3 even begins for Dallas Vegas, which I don't know how the scheduling worked out this way, but Dallas is a road favorite, up from minus 105 to minus 107, 55% of the cash on them, but 53% of the tickets on the other side on Vegas. Vegas winning the first 2 in the series, I think, has kind of put the public more on their side and off of the Dallas side. Vegas not liking what they've seen out of Dallas in those 2 games. Dallas, I think they kind of dominated game 1, man. I lost a play on that, but Dallas, they got out hit a lot. So Vegas was the more physical team, but that just is the case. Dallas more of a finesse team, but Dallas outshot them 29-15 in that game, and somehow Vegas got 4 goals on 15 shots in that game. A very bad performance from Ottinger in net there for Dallas, and Dallas out-face off them as well. And then looking at game 2, both of these were in Dallas too. Game 2, I think Dallas outplayed them again and lost again. Actually, Dallas got outshot a little bit. The hits were almost even, and Dallas outfaced off them. So it was just a close game statistically, but the score didn't look as close. But Vegas did also have an empty net goal at the end of that game. So the game was a lot closer, and Dallas was winning the game 1-0 for a while. Well, not for a while, but late in the first period. Vegas actually answered really quickly, but Dallas, they just look awful now. They've played those 2 awful games at home, but now I actually think going out on the road is actually going to help Dallas here. And Dallas is still looking for revenge against Vegas, which it's like, how much of a motivator is that really when Dallas just seems like they cannot beat Vegas? Dallas lost every game during the regular season to them, and they lost the series last year in the conference finals, I think. But of course, that was not a sweep, I'm pretty sure. So Dallas did win some of the games in that series. I think something's got to turn around here, man. And this is kind of a zig-zag type of scenario, except that it's the road team has won both games in the series so far. Now I think Dallas is going to have that road reversal kind of revenge type of spot on top of all the revenge motivation they already have for Vegas having knocked them out, eliminated them last year, and having beaten them every time since then. So I like Dallas here, man. The odds makers all series have been telling Dallas is actually the better team. I think the scores are somewhat misleading in those two games. Dallas has not played as poorly as the series results look. Dallas, I think, also actually has the better goaltender, despite that bad performance in game one. Ottinger, I think he's the more consistent goaltender. Vegas, their goaltending duo actually was not very good at the end of the season. They've been riding with Thompson in the playoffs, which I do think he's the best. Logan Thompson, he's the best of their goalies. They're alternating between him and Hill down the stretch towards the end of the season, and neither of them are really doing that well. So Vegas, like, they didn't seem to have that much consistency, although they've used Thompson both playoff games so far, and I probably expect that he'll be in there again, but I still think Vegas does have some pretty big question marks there at that goaltending position, even though it's been fine for them so far in the playoffs. I think at some point it's got to catch up with them. Again, the odds makers are telling you that what we've seen in the series so far is not really indicative of what these teams actually are. I think Dallas is going to get Vegas in the series at some point. And I think this is a spot where probably they're going to have the adjustments to make, be highly motivated. And leaving home, they get to like kind of put those distractions from hearing about how bad they are at home. They get to forget about that and go on the road. I think that'll actually help, where you're not listening to like the local radio and whatever, talking about how you suck. So I think it's better just go out on the road. So I'm going to take Dallas in hockey for the one hockey play here, minus 105. Looks like they do have the cash discrepancy. It looks like the line has ticked up on them a little bit. Moving over to the NBA, we have a lot of playoffs to talk about, man. Cavs, Magic, the bastard series here. It's that the ugly series where teams, teams play defense in the NBA still. I think this has been somewhat of an I don't know. I don't know if I'd say entertaining, but every game has been a lopsided result. But these teams are not playing bad basketball, right? It's not really a bad series necessarily. It's a 2-1 series. Cavs, of course, took both games at home. Magic took the most recent game, and I was on the Magic in that one. I almost took the Cavs in game one. I leaned to the Cavs in game one. I believe I took the over in game two and got blasted on that. I don't know if I have much of a feel on the totals in any of these, although I think game four tends to be more of an over type of game in NBA series because there's a little bit of a quicker turnaround time. And the teams have gotten to that new venue, played that one game. Now they're playing that next game like 2 days later or whatever. So I think the over like just tends to be kind of generally you see teams play like a little bit less intense defense sometimes in these games four. But I'm not going to be getting involved in that really. But Cavs, Magic are down from 3-2 here. They were 2 in game 3 at home. It looks like it's 2 with juice. 76% of the tickets on 62% of the cash. So it does look like recency bias coming in on the Magic, but the amount of cash is actually kind of in disagreement with that. So it seems like some of the bettors are coming in and actually taking the Cavaliers here, which I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think I would slightly lean to the Cavs to bounce back just because that performance was so bad in that previous game. But this has been a very home lopsided series, of course. Every team has won in a blowout at home so far. So do you really trust the Cavs, though, with the Magic being an excellent home team? I'm not so sure about that. Like, I don't expect the Magic to be like winning by 30 or 40 points in the game and be as good as they were in game 3, of course. But all they need to do is cover a 2-point spread basically here to cover here. So will they do that? It's quite possible. So you could have the Magic like suffer a huge regression in this game from what they did in the last game and still win this game. So I'm not going to actually play this one. The market indicators are slightly on the Cavs to adjust after playing poorly in that game 3, but I'm not so sure that is necessarily going to happen. And that game's at 1 p.m. Eastern, which is why why I said that that's like the bastard series. It's the series that's been relegated to like NBA TV for a lot of it. I think all of these games are going to be on TNT and stuff today, though. So all of these games will be more widely available on some of the national networks. So I have all of those channels. Yeah. Thunder Pelicans. This is a 2-0 Thunder lead in this series. This is a series that's actually only playing game 3, I believe, going back to New Orleans, or going to New Orleans now for game 3, with the Thunder winning both games at home, winning barely in game 1, which was a game where I leaned to the Pelicans, and then I took the Thunder. I laid the points in game 2, and they won easily in a blowout. So does that mean the zigzag will continue, and will this zig on the zag back to the Pelicans playing better? I'm not so sure about that. Thunder are sitting at a 1.5-point road favorite, which, I mean, based on what they were at home, that line seems pretty much about accurate. 50% of the tickets, so evenly split tickets, but 67% of the cash on the Thunder. So it does look like the Thunder are getting some of the bigger money in this one, and that is kind of the way I would lean here. The Pelicans, I mean, of course, they're still without Zion, and I've talked about how they actually in some ways play better without Zion, but that's still, you're still missing one of your key players, man. And that, I think that catches up to you at some point. Well, it kind of already did in the previous game. But the Pelicans, are also one of the only teams in the NBA that actually had a better road record than home record this year. So they've actually been worse at home, which is crazy to think about. And it's not really much travel for the Thunder to just have to go down to New Orleans here. So, and Thunder, I mean, they've been very good this year at covering spreads, and you're only asking them to basically just win the game here. So I do kind of lean to the Thunder in that one. I think the luck for the Pelicans, I think, is kind of run out. They're not a very good home team, and I just think the Thunder are the better team in the series, especially with Zion not being there. I think the Thunder are probably going to run into some difficulty up against some of these better teams. I think the next series could be a difficult one for them. I have them losing to Dallas in the next series in my bracket, but I think either opponent that comes out of that series is going to give the Thunder more difficulty than the Pelicans will in the remainder of this series. And yeah, I don't expect the Thunder, even though they're the 1 seed, they're very young. They're new to the playoffs, and Pelicans also don't have that much playoff experience with the Thunder. And the Magic are also pretty new to this. So a lot of inexperience on some of these teams. But the Thunder, I think that's going to catch up to them in one of the later series here. And even though they're the 1 seed, of course, I don't expect them to actually win the Western Conference. I have Denver doing that in my bracket. Denver, still the class of the conference, still the best team in the conference, even though there are a few pretty dangerous teams in the West. Celtics Heat, my Celtics going at 6 p.m. Eastern. Celtics up from 8 to 9.5 now. It looks like, or you can get 9s out there. It's 9.5 with reduced juice in some spots too. 64% of the tickets on the Celtics. I mean, they're the best team in the NBA power ratings wise, and the odds makers wise. They're telling you that they are with a lot of the odds, but they still, and they're going to be public for that reason. 64% of the tickets, but they do have 66% of the cash. So they have the cash discrepancy, and the numbers moving up on the Celtics a little bit. And this is the NBA game that I have a play on, which is going to be to lay the points with the Celtics. I thought this line might come out right around 10 points, but I think the Celtics are actually maybe getting a little bit shortchanged. I mean, they were 14.5 at home. So I guess, yeah, maybe 9.5 is kind of about right, given that 9.5, but it came out 8.5. I laid the 8.5. I don't know if there are still any 8.5s out there, but not much of a difference between 8.5 and 9. I like the Celtics to bounce back here and kind of zigzag this. I'm very shocking the Celtics did not win game 2. Not shocking they didn't cover, but to not win at all. This has been a bizarre series with just both games had such fluke aspects to it that I think you'll never see something like that again, where the Celtics in game 1, the game that I was at, had a franchise record amount of threes made in a playoff game. The Celtics took 45 3 attempts or something, and they hit 22 threes, which was the most for the Celtics franchise in a playoff game ever. But of course, the Celtics do jack up a ton of threes. That is part of their game, which I don't like, because that means that they are vulnerable for that reason if the threes aren't going down, although the Celtics are one of the best teams at hitting the three as well. They did that in game 1, but it was to an extreme extent where they outscored the Heat by some crazy amount from 3. I think they had somewhere in the double-digit amount of more threes. They had 22 threes. I think the Heat only had like 9 or something. So I think the Celtics outscored the Heat from like 39 from beyond the arc or something. But the Heat actually outscored the Celtics in the paint in that game. So the team that did better in the more consistent scoring, which is the scoring in the paint, because threes are low percentage shots. So the paint scoring is the more consistent metric. So it's usually what you can gauge, like what happened in a game by more. But the Heat won the game in the paint in game 1 and got blown out in the game. And then the Celtics dominated in the paint in game 2 and had a huge edge in the paint, more than the Heat even did in game 1. But the Celtics wound up losing game 2 anyway because the Heat shot so many threes. The Heat had a franchise record, not even just in the playoffs, but in the history of the Heat franchise. That was the most threes they've ever hit, 23 in the game. They had like at least 7 in the first quarter, whereas in game 1 they only had 3 made threes. Into the fourth quarter, they had more than doubled that in less than a quarter in game 2. That's a fluke as well. That's not going to happen again, man. I think you're going to have to see regressions to an extent here, and it's going to have to regress back to seeing the Celtics as the better team against the Heat without Jimmy Butler. I think after all the dust settles here, I think you got to see like the Celtics are going to come out and like show why they are indeed the better team here. The Heat are not going to hit 23 threes again. Celtics are not going to hit 22 again, even though the Celtics do jack up a ton. You'll probably see this just kind of return to a bit of normalcy here. And because the Celtics got caught and really didn't defend the 3 well and did not play a good game in game 2, even though the Celtics still could have won that game, even though the Heat hit so many more threes. You think that game should have been a blowout for the Heat, but they only won by 10, and it probably should have been closer than that. So that tells you that the Celtics are actually the better team, and they were doing the more consistent scoring in that one. And they just completely dominated the Heat in game 1, even though the Heat beat them in the paint. That was a weird game as well. So both weird games so far, but I think because the Celtics lost as a huge favorite at home to the Heat, this is going to be like a road reversal type of angle here with the Celtics. That's going to serve to refocus them. They realized that they didn't play well in that game. They got caught. They're going to have to play better, refocus, going out on the road here, get to forget about what just happened there, not listen to what the radio guys are saying, whatever, go on the road. Celtics are the better team. I think that they'll win and cover in this one. So I'm going to be on the Celtics here. I think that they're probably going to take the series in 5. I think they got punched in the mouth in that game, and I think that is going to serve to refocus them for the rest of the series. They're not going to let that happen again, and as the better team, they'll be able to put this thing away. And this is still revenge for the Celtics from last year's Eastern Conference Final, too. So the Celtics have multiple reasons to continue to be focused here, especially in this specific spot in this game, coming off getting upset as a huge favorite. That's got to serve to piss them off and refocus them. The Heat have upset. I was going to say poke the bear, but we're not talking about the Bruins here. We're talking about the Celtics. The Heat have poked the leprechaun, and now I think he's going to be a little bit angry here. And then we have Nuggets Lakers, maybe the least interesting of these. They get the night spot at 8:30 because it is LeBron and Jokic going up against each other. And who knows how many more times that's going to happen. Is LeBron going to finally retire? I mean, he's playing really well considering the fact that he's in his late 30s. He's almost 40 years old, but it looks like it's kind of the end of the road for him, man. The Nuggets are up from 2.5 to 3.5 now with juice. 60% of the tickets on them, 90% of the cash. So the Nuggets getting a lot of the money coming in on them. But game 3, the Lakers, I think, were a 1-point favorite or maybe a 1-point dog. And they were actually the favorite in the first half, but maybe they were a small underdog for the full game. So now this line has shifted to the Nuggets being a huge, well, not a huge favorite, but it's shifted multiple points. And that's, I think, because no team has ever come back from 0-3 in the NBA. Celtics were the closest team to doing it, I think, ever last year, where they, in that Heat series, where they were down 0-3, they pushed it to a game 7 where they were a home favorite in game 7. Jason Tatum got hurt immediately in the game. And if that hadn't happened, maybe the Celtics would have been the first team to ever do that. It's not going to happen in this Nuggets-Lakers series, man. I think the Nuggets probably just put it away in this one. The Lakers, I mean, they're an aging team, man. They're 2 star players who have, like LeBron and AD account for like half of their scoring almost. And those 2 guys are so old that you see in games, they start out playing really well early in the games and they just drop off significantly towards the end of the game. And I think that might happen like from a series perspective as well. I just don't see the Lakers being able to do this here, even though the Lakers have given the Nuggets some scares. The Lakers have now lost 11 games in a row against the Nuggets, even though they have covered the number in some of those. Lakers have blown leads, I think, in every one of these series. Now, I think the Lakers were winning at the half in all three of the games in this series and still lost all three. I just don't think, I think that this is the end of it for the Lakers. They'll try to put in a good performance for their home team, but I think they're going to run out of steam, and I think the Nuggets probably put this away here, but it's not going to actually be a play for me. I'm not going to play against a home underdog that's playing for their lives, but I just think that maybe the previous game was really like the dream crusher type of game because it's the NBA, and if you fall down 3-0, you know you're not coming back. So the Lakers could be playing like kind of a dead team by the end of it. So that's what I think about those games. And we'll move on to Major League Baseball, where my two plays in Major League Baseball, I'm actually going against what I see in the market, and I'm just like, whatever. I don't care. I'm just going to trust what I think here. I'm going to try to not belabor this too much, but I'm very much going against the market in both games here. The first game will be Oakland-Baltimore is where I'm looking at. I'm going to play this one over the total. Hopefully I get back to my winning ways on the totals, which I'm now 12-1, I think, on full game totals. I'm going full game over on this one. You can get over 8 right now. It looks like it was 8.5 juice to the under at one point, and now it's 8 juice to the over. So there hasn't really been much movement here. I was able to find an 8 at minus 110, though. Looks like that's still out there, or maybe minus 112. So you can still get the 8s out there, it looks like. Although it looks like 53% of the tickets are on the over, but 77% of the cash coming in the under. So it does look like there's cash coming in the under, and the line has moved towards the under here. I don't agree with it. I think that JP Sears is being overvalued in the market a little bit here, especially as far as the total is concerned. And it's part of the reason why I'm going with this. It's JP Sears against Cole Irvin in this one. Not exactly two powerhouses in this pitching matchup here. Not a powerhouse pitching matchup. JP Sears, I think, is in a major letdown spot, dude. He's coming off another excellent performance. His performances have been really good so far this year. He has a 3.38 ERA and a 1.05 whip, but he has a 16-10 strikeout walk ratio, which is terrible, in 26 2/3. He hasn't allowed many hits, but can you really sustain numbers that are that good, like ERA and whip-wise, if you're not striking out that many guys and you have that bad a strikeout walk ratio? I don't think so. Like, that shows me that there's going to be some regression here for Sears. Last year in his first full season with Oakland, he had a 4.54 ERA, and he's in his late 20s now, so it's not like he's this young newcomer to the league either. Although he's only been in the league since 2022, and the Yankees got rid of him, which is what I'm about to talk about as far as he did in his previous game. He had a 1.26 ERA last year. His strikeout rate was actually a little bit better last year, 161, 172 in the third innings, but 53 walks. So again, his strikeout walk rate ratio wasn't very good. Now what we're looking at with him this season, he started out the season bad. He had a bad first start against Cleveland, his worst start of the season. He wasn't good against Detroit either. And Detroit, not exactly an offensive powerhouse. Cleveland is okay. Then he really, it was like he flipped a switch and he took a no-hitter into the 7th against Texas. A very good offense. Very good performance for Sears. But that was a divisional matchup against the returning champs, man. So maybe he's stepping up for these games that are emotional highs for him, or he has reasons to really get up and play well. So he did that in that Texas game, even though he walked 3 guys. He only gave up 1 hit, and he got pulled in the 7th inning. As soon as he gave up a hit, they pulled him after he lost a no-hitter. It's like, get him out of there. Even though he was at 88 pitches, he could have gone a little bit longer. But still a very good start for him there. Then he did lose the next game, so he had a little bit of regression in the next game against St. Louis, even though he only allowed 1 earned run and he only allowed 2 hits. He had 3 walks and only 2 strikeouts in that game. So that wasn't a very good start, even though the number of runs that he gave up wasn't bad. He's got some issues, man. And then he had his best start of the season, probably, maybe except for I think it was maybe even better than the Texas one. He faced his former team, the team that got rid of him, the Yankees, and I think he was really pumped up for that one. And he went 6 innings, only allowing 3 hits, and posted a 7-1 strikeout walk ratio in a shutout. And I believe, actually, he didn't get the decision in that one somehow. I think it was a scoreless game when he came out of the game because they wound up winning 2-0 behind his excellent performance. But now I think he's in line for a big letdown / regression here, man, where he has had 2 huge performances in the last 3 games. And that game against St. Louis after the Texas game, which was the almost no-hitter, basically, or the no-hitter he carried into the 7th, he had kind of a regression in the next game against St. Louis. Then he stepped back up and had an excellent game against his former team, the Yankees. Big game for him to step up, man. So now I think he's going to be in a letdown regression scenario again here. He's facing a Baltimore team that can hit, man. So I don't think this is a good spot for Sears here. And against the Orioles have seen him and they've hit him pretty well. They're 18 for 63 off him lifetime with 4 doubles, a triple, 4 home runs. He does somehow have a 17.5 strikeout walk ratio against him, which is un-Sears like, really, that he has that good of a strikeout walk ratio against him. But the rest of those numbers aren't very good. Baltimore is a 286. Their hitters are 286 off him batting average lifetime and a 910 OPS, which is pretty high. So Sears in a letdown and regression spot coming off that huge start against the Yankees. And he's facing a Baltimore team who historically has hit him pretty well. So that looks like Sears might be in line for a bit of a regression here. And then on the other side, Baltimore, Cole Irvin, he just hasn't even been good this year, man. I mean, he's got a 4.64 ERA, 1.45 whip. Not very good. His stats last year were kind of similar to that, although his whip was a little bit better in his first season with Baltimore. He did a bit better with Oakland the prior year, but other than that, his stats on his career, not very good. He's already 30, even though he's only been in the league since 2019. So both of these pitchers are kind of like lefty junk pitchers who aren't really known for striking guys out. They put too many guys on base, so it's very similar between Irvin and Sears in a lot of ways. Sears putting too many men on base here. This year, he's got a 13-7 strikeout walk ratio, which is terrible. In 21 1/3 innings, none of that is good at all. He's not striking guys out. He's walking too many guys. He's coming off a nice shutout performance against the Kansas City Royals, where he still only had a 2.2 strikeout walk ratio on that one, even though he shut them out through 6 2/3. Good performance for him, but in his other starts, he's been awful in all of them. He didn't even get through the 5th inning against Minnesota. It was not a very good hitting team, although he only got 2 runs in that one, but he put a lot of guys on base. He didn't walk anybody in that game somehow, but he gave up 6 hits and they had to pull him. He gave up 5 runs against Boston, had 7 hits and 3 walks allowed in that one. And then in the first game, 7 hits and 2 walks allowed in another game against Kansas City where he gave up 4 runs. He's just not been very good. And against his numbers are just his numbers are pretty consistent, and they're consistently not very good. And his numbers against this Oakland A's lineup here, this is where it puts it over the top for me to take an over. I think this 8 is a bit low on the total here because I think it's factoring in how good Sears has been so far this year, but I think it's also factoring in how bad Oakland's offense is. But they have not been that bad against Cole Irvin, man. Not everybody has seen him before. Only 5 of Oakland's hitters have seen him before. But he's pitched pretty poorly, and they're 8 for 20 off of him lifetime with 3 doubles, a home run, only a 3.2 strikeout walk ratio. So small sample size, 20 at bats. Only 5 of the Oakland hitters have seen him, but that's a 400 batting average and a 1,155 OPS. So Irvin has been pretty bad against these Oakland hitters, the ones that he's faced. So I think this looks to be in line with this looks to be a spot where both starting pitchers are going to struggle here. And then let's put it over the top even further. Yesterday's game in the series was a low-scoring game, a 3-2 game where Oakland was losing the game 2-1 into the 9th inning. It was an extremely low-scoring game. They tied it in the 9th and then wound up winning the game in extra innings. So a huge upset for Oakland. So you could say Oakland's also in line for a letdown spot here. So Sears is in the letdown spot, and Oakland is also in a letdown spot after that. So you might want to lean to Baltimore on the side as well. But with Cole Irvin pitching, I think the better way to do this is to play the over here. So yesterday, I think we're also getting value in that over because yesterday's score was so low, a 3-2 extra inning game. So that's, I think, going to give you a little bit of extra value on the total here as well, because that game was so low scoring, even though it also included an extra inning there. But Corbin Burns, not Cole Irvin, Corbin Burns pitched for Baltimore. And of course, he's like their ace. He's excellent. So that had something to do with how low the score was in that game. And Stripling, I don't know, somehow put together a pretty good performance. But now you got both pitchers in this matchup today are, I think, in a worse situation and just not as good pitchers as those guys are. Of course, almost nobody's as good as Burns. So that had something to do with why the game was so low scoring yesterday. But then also, Oakland used 3 of their relievers. They used a couple of their better relievers, including their closer, Miller, to come in and get the save. So they have a few of their better relievers unavailable. And then on the Orioles side, they used 5 relievers yesterday and used some of their better relievers. They have a decent bullpen. They used a lot of the guys that have some of the best ERAs out of their bullpen yesterday. A lot of the guys that have sub-3 ERAs basically all came in. They used their closer as well, Kimbrel, and he blew the save in the 9th inning. And then they used a couple additional relievers. So the bullpen situation, I think, is not great for either team either. So that also lends itself to an over here. So that's going to be the play there, the over. And then the other game I'm going to be on, I'm going to a team, even though I think Miami is kind of in a bounce back spot, where I thought Miami was in a good spot yesterday, even though I believe they're in a return home spot, which is why I didn't want to do it. But Miami wound up not actually playing Luzardo. I think maybe he's hurt or something. So when you listen to my leans here, you got to make sure that the starting pitching matchup that I talk about still winds up being the starting pitching matchup by the time the game happens. And at least I had not bet either of those games. There have been 2 games in the last 3 days where I talked about, I like this game with this starter here. Like that would be my lean. And then that starter wound up getting scratched late for some reason. And that sucks if you have a bet on. But I think most of the books, though, like when you bet, it specifically says that the bet is also taking into account that it's this starting pitching matchup. So if one of the starters gets scratched or whatever, I think the bet actually pushes from most books. I don't know that. I'm sure it's happened to me at some point, but I can't remember it ever happening. And I guess it was close to happening because I was almost on Miami thinking Luzardo was going to pitch yesterday. He didn't actually pitch. So Miami wound up losing the game, and it was in a return home spot. So yes, that does mean that Miami is sort of in what tends to be a positive, like a bounce back spot. Because when you're a team that returns home from a road trip and you play a bad game in game 1, in the first game home, a lot of times it's that distracted spot, and a lot of times you play better in game 2. But I'm still going against Miami here because everything else about this matchup, I think, is not in favor of Miami, although the market looks like it's against me here. Miami's getting some reverse line movement, going up from minus 125 to minus 127 as a home favorite. 70% of the tickets on the other side on Washington and only 53% of the cash. So it does look like the public is coming in on Washington, even though Washington's not a very good team either. Miami is way behind them, though, and one of the worst records in baseball, really, in Miami. And you're giving me, the public is going to say, you're giving me Miami's this much of a favorite. I'm going to fade them and take the underdog price against them. But in this spot, I actually think that it's warranted to go against Miami here. Washington beat them 3-1 yesterday, as I alluded to. Miami really torched their bullpen yesterday, man. Like Luzardo got scratched. So they used Maldonado, who had to kind of make a spot start there and is not a guy who goes deep into games. So he had to be pulled. He pitched pretty well, but he's just a guy with a short leash that they can't leave in that long. So they had to take him out. And then they used 5 relievers after that, including having to try to win the game there. They were actually winning 1-0, and then it was a 1-1 game into the 8th inning, and their bullpen blew it. So after that, they used 5 of their relievers, whereas on the national side, Williams gave them 5 innings, although he didn't pitch particularly well, but he still somehow only allowed 1 run. And then Washington did use a few of their better relievers. That's true. They used their closer, Finnegan, and a couple of their better relievers. But I still think the Marlins bullpen is in the worst situation. I think they're the worst bullpen in general, and they use some of their better relievers and more of their relievers than Washington did. So I think the bullpen edge in this game to start out is not on the side of Miami. So I think we get a little bit of an edge on the Washington side for that reason. Then in addition to that, look at the starting pitching matchup, man. Edward Cabrera is pitching for Miami. And yeah, I mean, he's definitely got a lot of strikeout stuff. His strikeout numbers have been really high on his career, and they're high again this year. He's got a 17.4 strikeout walk ratio this year. And 11 innings. That's good. He has had a very high strikeout rate throughout his career. He's still a pretty young guy, 26, so he has really good strikeout stuff. And, I tend to like to look at that, but he's been unbelievably wild over his career, too. He has 238 strikeouts in 208 and two-thirds innings pitched, but 122 walks. I don't know how you can have such a high strikeout rate, but have that low a strikeout walk ratio, a 2 strikeout walk ratio with that many strikeouts. That means he has a ton of walks. Somehow his ERA in his career is down at 3.97, but a 1.34 whip, that's not good. Last year was his first basically full season or almost full season. He had a 4.24 ERA and 1.44 whip. So his whip tends to be way too high with all these guys he's walking. And he seems to somehow get away with it in some cases because he's very difficult to hit, but he's just so all over the place and wild, man. And this year, that's been the case too. 1.45 whip, even though he has a 3.27 ERA. He's only made 2 starts so far, and that whip is indicative that his ERA should be higher, man. And he had a good start in his first outing against San Francisco. Very good strikeout walk rate in that game, 10-1, but not a very good offense either. Maybe he was pumped up to make his debut. Then he regressed a bit against the Cubs, where he allowed 10 base runners in 5 innings in that game. 10 earned base runners, 3 walks, 7 hits. He did have 7 strikeouts. So that's a typical type of line for Cabrera. I just don't think he's that good, man. And then looking at his numbers against the Nationals, they've seen him. He's been in their division, so they've seen him a decent amount. And his numbers aren't that great against them either. They're 9 for 33 off him, a double, 3 home runs. He does have an 8-1 strikeout walk ratio against him, which is good, but they have a 273 batting average against him and an 870 OPS. So they've been able to hit him pretty decently, and that's without being walked much at all. So even though he's like the best part of his game is that he tends to be fairly unhittable, but that hasn't really been the case against these Washington hitters. They've been able to hit him. So that doesn't look good for Cabrera. And then to put this over the top, I think Washington has the edge here with newcomer Mitchell Parker, who I said maybe wasn't like the best like prospect there that they have like in the organization, but he is proving me wrong so far, man. In 2 starts in his major league career, he's got a 12-0 strikeout walk rate. He hasn't allowed a home run yet. Well, yeah, I was going to say he hasn't allowed a run, but he didn't allow a run against Houston. He did allow 2 in his debut against the Dodgers. He faced a couple of pretty good lineups, man, the Dodgers and Houston, and he did that against them. 12 strikeouts, no walks, only 7 hits allowed, 2 earned runs allowed in 12 innings. He came out and he did that against those potent lineups, man. And now he's facing the Marlins. I mean, the Marlins offense is nowhere near as good as those two. So man, I like Mitchell Parker, man. And maybe he's got some stuff, man. He's coming in. He is a lefty. I don't think he throws quite as hard as some of these other guys that I like who come into the league, but he is 6'4". He's a lefty. He's a looming presence on the mound, and maybe that lefty arm angle is throwing these hitters off. But I think he has the extra edge here, as I think he did in those first 2 games, facing lineups who have never seen it before. That tends to be an advantage to the pitcher, especially when they're throwing something like unique out there, something new, which I think maybe he does, which is going to give those hitters difficulty the first times they face him. So I think Parker has the edge here, and he's under the radar right now, man. Those are 2 good starts against good lineups. He's been dealing it. So I like Parker in this one better than I like Cabrera. Getting an underdog price here. I think Washington has the edge in the starting pitching matchup and in the bullpen rest angle. Not in the market or the situation, but I still think that I would much rather take the team that has Parker starting and has the better hitters and the bullpen that's better and in the better rest scenario here. So that's what I'm going to do, man. I'm going to jump on. I'm going to play Mitchell Parker. Yeah, he's been excellent so far this year. So that's going to do it for me, man. Those plays today, one more time. In baseball, Oakland, Baltimore, over 8. Washington Nationals as an underdog, plus 118. Boston Celtics, let's go. Let's go, Celtics. Come on, man. Turning it back around. Celtics minus 8.5. And Dallas Stars going with these road favorites in playoffs here, minus 105. Let's do it. Peace. I'm flashing the peace sign at nobody. Peace.